We're back. Welcome to CPG Vibes, number 191. These numbers are getting out of control. CPG Talk 104. Thanks for joining us. I'm back. Gavin's here. Let's chat. What's going on, man?
Wade, what is going on? Not too much on my side. Been a great work week, and I'm excited to talk about a little bit about your last week or so, flying out to San Diego for Fancy Fair and that trade show, and then just talking CPG.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny. Last week's episode, which, by the way, since I flew out, said I didn't get the episode uploaded to Apple Podcasts and YouTube, so shame on me. But I'll get that done. But we had Shannon Peffley on last week, and so I'm sure we're going to dive into, as you said, Fancy Fair a little bit, and got to see Shannon there and what he's working on that he talked a lot about last week. And if you're a brand or anyone in that space for that matter, make sure you go back and watch that after I get off my duff and get it uploaded, because what he's doing is pretty cool, and got to see a little bit of it firsthand last week. And
Honestly, Wade, like, why don't we start there? I mean, that's a perfect segue since we had Shannon on last week. What was
yeah,
his?
yeah.
I know
So
he talked about it a little bit about like his what he has going on at that trade show, and then he was talking a little bit about uh
what
being
he's built.
booted from other ones.
Yeah,
So
yeah, and yeah, I'll get into that. I just want to say hi to everybody that's joining. I see Hank, Dan, Melissa. Good to see you guys. If you're joining for the first time or it's been a minute, put your comments in the chat. We're here for you. We'll talk. Any questions you have or comments, topics. We want to be community oriented here, so throw them in there. We'll get to them. Yeah. So my days run together. I flew in on Saturday. Daughter picked me up at the airport, as most of you may know. She still lives out in San Diego, so that was really one of the highlights was getting to see her. She was here for Christmas, but getting a ride from her at the airport and had some lunch before got into show stuff. Then that was Saturday. Saturday evening, I did an event with the Canadian consulate, who we're doing something with at Expo West, and they had an event with Good Food, the collective. So I was able to hang out there a little bit, see some people. That was cool. And then Sunday, got to see Shannon and CPG Experience at the event they did with the piano bar, which was really cool because I'm a sucker for piano bar, and so aside from the entertainment, good turnout. I thought the turnout was amazing. The place was full, lots of interested people. From all walks of life. There were service providers there. I saw Robert Johnson, formerly of New Seasons, got to spend some time with him. A lot of people. I mean, I couldn't possibly. Ashley Rogers from Shelf Made, she was there, and so lots of good networking and just a good time in general. And then he had it at least at this show. One of his space kind of farmed out with brands, and so some brands that probably wouldn't have been able to have space at that show were able
so
to.
Wade, like on that note, did he have he had like a fixture of multiple brands?
Yeah, exactly, kind of wrapped around. I think it was kind of U-shaped. I don't know if it was a complete circle, but definitely U-shaped.
Cool.
There was a lot of people. Like I said, smaller brands that, probably, maybe not even smaller, just brands that probably wouldn't have had an opportunity to do something like that, with what Shannon put together for them, at least for this show, he was able to do. And so it was really cool and very well received. I think I don't want to speak for him. Maybe sometime we'll have him back on the show to hear it firsthand. But I think he was pretty overwhelmed and pretty pleased with the turnout for the event, and then also the response and just the overall feeling for what he put together. And just kudos to him for everything that he's been working on.
Yeah, I dig that. That's awesome. Um, was there anything that you saw at the show that stood out, or I mean, obviously, you fast forward 2 months or less than 2 months, I guess, at this point. We're going to be at Expo West. Was anybody doing any new innovation or anything like that, or was it just
Yeah, I didn't spend as much time on the floor as I would like to, just looking at brands. I spent a lot of time with Brandon, our VP of Sales. We talked to a lot of retailers connected with. I don't want to leave anybody out, so I'm not going to name specifics. Aside from we did an event which we publicized with Whole Foods. We had a lunch with them, and then I flew back Tuesday. The team did a pitch slam with them on Tuesday, and mostly around their foraging team. And those folks are all great. Marcy and her team. I don't want to name all of them. I'm gonna leave someone out, but just great again networking. So I didn't get to spend as much time as I did walking, but I was slightly underwhelmed with the overall, like what I would say, innovation. So just seems like a lot of things. It was just, the fancy in general typically is geared towards, a lot of more imported things than expo but what I will say is typically that's the case. But I did see a pretty good assortment of grocery, more so maybe than years past, specific to fancy, not expo, specific to fancy. So it was nice to see that. Startup CPG had a presence there. Shannon CPG Experience had a presence there. So that the emerging brand, certainly was represented, in my opinion, more so than perhaps other fancy events. So that was good to see. But generally speaking, I didn't walk out of there with like, oh man, this was the hit of the show, or oh, this was something I've never seen before. Nothing like that really struck me that much.
Yeah. Well, I think that's okay. I think again, all these larger brands or emerging brands that want to unleash the innovation, there's Super Bowls in a month and a half, so it would make sense if they're holding off there. I think as we talk about this trade show and other trade shows, and me being on the brand side and you being on the broker side now, obviously the focus goes to, well, what was the retailer outlook like? I
Yeah.
think you just mentioned Whole Foods and Sprouts. Was anybody else
Yeah,
there,
yeah,
obviously?
yeah. So I ran into, I know the Jimbo's crew was represented there, which was probably a
Local to
get.
San Diego, so I would hope
Well, I
so.
was just gonna say that was a get in my opinion, because when they were in Vegas, I don't think that's a show they typically go to. It's hard not to justify that when they're in San Diego. So got to see, especially beer and wine buyer. All those guys obviously are personal friends from my time there. But I ran to him on the first day that I was Monday, the first day walking the floor. Eric, got to see him. The whole team was there. I think later Monday and Tuesday. My days again. I might have my day screwed up, but I didn't get to connect with the grocery team, but they were there. I know Mothers was there. I know the Fresh Market was there, and represented. I spent some time with the Fresh team, so specifically the deli food service folks, which was really cool. I haven't seen a lot of those folks since I left. I know the grocery team was there, not the full team though, just a smaller portion of the team.
Mhm.
Deli food service, and again, I think it represents what in years past that show was, which was, it had a high focus on food service, deli, cheeses, things of that nature
Yeah, I wanna
versus
say
grocery.
yeah, I wanna say, well, the last fancy food that I think I was at as a retailer was 2020, right before the pandemic when they had it out in San Francisco, and it felt like that specific show. It was a lot more like, deli cheeses, or sorry,
Hmm.
not deli cheeses,
Specialty.
fancy cheese, yeah, specialty cheeses and things like that, and much more, yeah, specialty in general.
Yeah.
There was a grocery presence and things like that, but not nearly as heavy as, those specialty cuts of meat and cheese and, those fancier items. So, it does, sound like what you're saying is there's more of a grocery presence at this show.
Yeah, I think so. When I was in New York in June for the June event, I would say it was pretty much the same. There was grocery, certainly not expo, but I feel like this event compared to what I witnessed in June, it felt like there was a definitely a better representation of grocery and leaning towards emerging than New York. So I see progress. I did see some, there. I unfortunately wasn't able to attend any of the educational seminars or anything like that, just based on the schedule and commitments I had. But going to Melissa's comment here, I think we've touched on them. Fresh Market, Whole Foods. I know Sprouts had folks there. We saw Jimbo's. I saw Mothers. I saw, my goodness, just a lot. Yeah, I saw the KE teams out on the floor. I saw Unify teams out on the floor. So good overall. Good overall. And again, it's hard to beat San Diego in January, especially as you and I were talking before we went on the air. It's like low high teens and low 20s where we're at here on the East Coast. This time of year. So it was nice to get away and get some sunshine. But yeah, overall was good. So I want to put this back on you. We talked about stuff like this in the past, but I think, the audience differs. You have different people here today. Different people are going to listen to it after the fact. So put yourself in these shoes, your shoes, your brand. You just had a booth at this event. The event, for all intents and purposes, people are coming in Saturday, but A little bit of on Sunday, but the higher traffic was Monday and I'm sure Tuesday when I came back. But so the event, call it Saturday to Tuesday, maybe extended to Wednesday. You're flying back. You come back with leads.
Mm.
Your brand. What's your strategy as far as follow up and execution on the leads coming out of that show for an event that started? Again, calling it Saturday, running into call it Wednesday. Now you're Thursday. You're back in the office. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think if the retailers are kind of pulling out of that show Wednesday, is that kind of what you're saying?
Tuesday, Wednesday. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Tuesday, Wednesday.
Yeah.
Um, I think if they left two, I mean, again, I'm just going to use two. I'm going to use Wednesday as the example. Like, hey, let's just,
Yeah.
they're probably back in office either Wednesday afternoon or Thursday morning. So,
Mhm.
what I would do if I felt like I had a really good connection with somebody, maybe I would be brave and write those select few buyers Friday
Yeah.
morning. Um, and that's only if like you feel really good about that. Um, Otherwise, that's going to be risky because now if they don't read that email, all those canned reports that they get the resale side, it's going to get buried, and you're going to be sending another follow up the next week,
Mhm.
Wednesday, Thursday. So again, I'm prefacing this with if you feel like you had a really good connection and had a really good, the buyer was interested, the broker was with you, or the unifier or KE or your distributor was with you, and everybody's vibing, I think Friday's fair. On the opposite side of that, if everything was just a warm lead, you probably need to wait until Tuesday afternoon to kind of start
Mm.
sending those emails off because look, they're catching up on the 3 days that they just missed, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then get back in the office Thursday, Friday. They're going to be backed up. And then Monday their week starts over and hopefully they're caught up, but Monday is the start of a new week and new problems and recapping the previous week's sales for the retailer. So that's what I would suggest doing. If you're getting stuff out Tuesday afternoon, Wednesday morning, I think you're going to be in the good graces of the buyer at that point,
Yeah.
especially if it's a warm lead. And then the cadence after that, if it's been 5 days and they haven't reached back out to you with a reply, um, again, this is where you're hopefully incorporating the broker in that portion of the conversation or CC the broker. Figure out a cadence with your broker on, hey, I'll take the first two stabs at the buyer. But after that, it's like, hey, please step in,
Right.
and if you step in and get a response, because again, they should have the real good relationship or the better relationship with the buyer, um, put that onus on them. Or vice versa, they have the really good relationship, let them do the grunt work,
Yep.
and then you step in after the second or third email and take it over from there.
Yeah, yeah, I'm picking on Hank because he said Monday, and I was going to say again, looking at it from past life and kind of going with what you're saying is you're back in the office Wednesday, Thursday, you're buried from being gone, and then you get the weekend trying to catch your breath, coming back Monday, probably still buried from stuff that came in over the
Yeah,
weekend and
and
catch up.
wait, if I can interrupt, like,
Yeah,
I would really suggest all brands not to reach out on Monday.
ever,
Um,
ever,
Ever.
not just future oriented.
Yeah, ever.
And
I
explain
think
what explain why.
yeah, I mean, Monday's the start of the retail week. I mean, they're recapping the previous week's sales. So, typically in my past, all the retailers that I've worked for, which is 2 or 3, they are Monday morning is gonna be sales oriented. You're focused on the stores. If you're a category manager, you're more than likely recapping something to your director. That director is also recapping something to their VP. The VP is recapping something to the CEO, right? That's all previous week sales or month end sales or quarter end sales. That's all going to start happening on that Monday.
Yeah,
Obviously, the month end, quarter end, that stuff's going to drag out more than a couple days. But for that category manager, let's just pick on dairy for a second. That category manager is getting it at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning and more than likely recapping every single category within dairy. So was alt milk up? Was grocery milk up? Was yogurt up? Was functional bev up? Like all that stuff. And then they're digging into each of those categories too. So If alt milk was up, what drove alt milk up? Was it Calafia? Was it Mulk? Was it X, Y, and Z? Right? You're digging into that because your director needs to know that stuff when he's in his executive meetings over the next 2 days.
Right.
So Mondays, I would always stress, like, I think you're just wasting your time. Towards the tail end of the Monday, yeah, maybe they're freed up a little bit. But I would really start uh, the email cadence on Tuesday.
That's a hot take. That's a hot take to say, and I don't disagree with it. I'm gonna probably expand on it as well. I would say, in some cases, depending on the reporting structure, that can bleed into even Tuesday, right? Because everything you just said, CM up to director, director up to VP, and so on up the ladder, the earlier meetings and stuff starting to Monday, and there's a couple of places I've been. The key business review meetings were Tuesday mornings, right? Because you allowed Monday for everything you just said, and so sometimes the actual meetings themselves, kind of bled into Tuesday, and so I mentioned Hank saying Monday. Brianna says, "Don't ever try to circle back on a Monday." She's recapping multiple cappuccinos or capping multiple cappuccinos. I get it totally. But yeah, I think it's, it's kind of like, you want to maintain that connection that you established and the what you built at the show, but there's a fine line there in the swarm of emails that you're dealing with, and then also just the absence of being gone and normal business when you come back, and you don't want to lose that momentum, but you also have to kind of understand the way it works.
Yeah, and, like, look, it's not gonna stop anybody from emailing on a Monday. I just know, like, what my past was like, and, I know that that's not gonna be my focus point is not gonna be on a brand that I saw at a trade show. It's gonna be on my routine of my reporting structure to my boss's reporting structure, the meetings that you're having, because again, you're getting all your meeting or you're getting all your reports for your meeting that you're having with your director as a CM. That's going to happen all day Monday, and then you're more than likely going to have that meeting sometime between 3 and 5, 3 and 4:30 p.m. Monday afternoon. And again, that could bleed over to Tuesday
Mhm.
too. But that's where your dairy category manager, frozen category manager, grocery category manager, all that is, they're all having the reporting up to their boss, having that meeting, discussing the week, what worked, what didn't. So again, I'm not in my past, I'm not focused on anything outside of my reporting and sales for the stores on Monday. So again, you're going to have some success reaching out to people on Monday. I just would suggest wait until Tuesday.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is just prioritizing, right? If you should be prioritizing as a brand, who your key targets were coming out of that show. And when I
Yep.
say key, ABC, however you want to, whatever system you want to use, but here's who the top of my list following up from the show, and then kind of working it that way. And then certainly from a retailer perspective, you're not, at least I don't think, you're not going to be, unless you were blown away by something and just saw some pocket of gold at the end of the rainbow, you're not going to be the aggressive person. You're going to expect the brand, broker, whoever, to own that and follow up, right? And that we've talked about this, whether you talk about entitlement or what have you as a buyer, but you're the customer in that case, and so you're going to expect, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the brand, broker, whoever is going to be the aggressor and come back after you, right?
Yeah. 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 And then, I do feel like a lot of people rush into the conversations with their buyers and things like that. And I do want to stress that if you have a good broker and that broker's got a good relationship, like talk to your broker about it. Like, hey, how should we handle this communication to Kenny? And, what do you feel like, when do you feel like he's going to want to see this? Or, if that broker's got a good relationship with Kenny, I mean, they're going to direct everything. They're going to tell
Right.
you what you need to do or what this person's going to do. And you're going to be on CC. Should be a collective effort if you have a broker. If you're doing it solo, obviously there's no wrong way to skin a cat at the end of the day, but I would always be patient. Make sure your language is good. Don't write a book to the buyer. And something that I would do in this situation too is if I am following up Tuesday, Wednesday, and it was a warm lead, screenshot or snip your sell sheet or whatever is most impactful with your brand as like a refresher. Make sure that it's not attaching a PDF. And why I say that is because if that person's on their cell phone during a meeting and their emails hooked up to their cell phone, opening a PDF on an email kind of sucks, or an Excel file, all that kind of stuff. But if it's a snippet and they can just see the picture as they scroll down, like that's going to be very impactful. Plus, it eliminates a step. So keep it relatively short. You don't want to spill or empty your briefcase in the message. Obviously, just know that there's going to be 5, 6, 7, 8 back and forths on an email more than likely, or there's going to be a chain of it. So less is more in something like this.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And before I forget, I forgot one event that I did, and it ties into our guest next week. Our guest next week is Joe Marie Pinkard with Hella Cocktail, one of the co-founders of Hella Cocktail, but also one of the founding members of Included CPG, which is a nonprofit committed to empowering entrepreneurs and leaders of color in food and beverage. And I attended their breakfast on Monday. They did an event, and so I got to see Joe Marie and Victoria Ho, just lovely people. Joe Marie's going to be guest with us next week on the show, so I'm really looking forward to diving into his background on not just the Hella Cocktail, which is one of the leaders going way back in the mocktail space, and now with what he's doing on with the Included CPG. So a little plug for next week, but also that's something I missed that I did at the show as well. But yeah, great stuff. Hank says if Monday is stress and they had an unforgettable demo, then I'll be the excitement in their inbox. So
Yeah, that's a positive spin on it, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, you know? Like, again, every founder and every salesperson, if you've got a really good vibe with the situation, you can send an email at any time of the day or night, Monday through Friday or Saturday or Sunday, and, if you know that the buyer liked it and, you're gonna get you can generate a response.
right.
So,
Right. Got a comment here from Robert, CHFA West, Vancouver. Late February, we're devising strategies to convert the show and tell show to an actual commitment show. Orders, and more orders. We're working on strategies to incentivize them to make the order to get the savings and reliable fulfillment. Helps create stickiness to the customer, a reason to keep in touch. And Robert, it's a good point. I mean, my first trade shows in the business were distributor shows, and in the very beginning, specific to, I'm going back to my conventional days, my primary wholesaler, those were shows.
mhm,
There was a true incentive for me to walk out of that show and with orders turned in. And I remember vividly. Now I'm dating myself a little bit, but going back, we actually collected what was called like food show cash. And it
mhm.
wasn't real cash, but it was we measured our success at the show by how much food show money we collected coming out of that show. Now over time, that model switched a little bit, and I actually was one of the spearheaders to say this isn't no longer I'm not incentivized anymore to do that at the show, because they kept the window open after the show, and I could come back to my office, process what I had worked through, and place orders back at my desk. And then it even evolved further into, okay, now that model doesn't exist. It's like it's just maybe a quarter a case versus, and it just wasn't worth my time when you factored out of the office and travel and things like that. But um the original Kehi shows that I went to at that same time for that same
Yeah,
retailer in Chicago, again, there was a lot of incentive for me to place orders there. I could negotiate live on hand. They were turning in orders and processing and saying, okay, if I buy 20 instead of 10, or 50 instead of 20,
mhm.
here's what we could do. And again, you're walking out and you're seeing real live, what those savings are. So the model's out there. It's just not the fancy model necessarily. It's not the expo model, right?
Yeah, yeah, I can remember, I'm not dating myself nearly as much as you, but there was a grocery warehousing group called Nash Finch, who was
That's right.
then purchased by Spartan,
Spartan Ash.
and
Spartan Ash. Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
I think this was like 2011, 2012, maybe. I went to my first distributor show, which was Nash Finch for my brand, and it was wild. Those people. the grocery managers, the directors, the store managers, like, they would go crazy at that show. You know, you're
Mhm.
buying truckloads of toilet paper and, all the best-selling items, and the brands showed up, right? And Coke and Pepsi and all those guys, and, I feel like that's lost a little bit. You know, you can still kinda do that a little bit at Unify and KeHE, but it's not nearly to the level that those warehousing shows are.
Right.
Because those warehousing shows, obviously, it's all the stuff that's planogrammed and carried through the warehouse for those stores. So you kinda you can go big at those shows. But I also remember, taking out, one one of our clients that night, and that was my first experience at a vendor dinner that was, like, not $100, not $2,000. You know, it was like 5 Gs at the end of the day, and this was down in Indianapolis, so we took him out to a nice steak place, and,
Fort
um
Wayne, Indiana, baby, right?
yeah, or maybe
Or
that's
right,
where it
yeah,
was. I can't
maybe.
remember
Yeah,
where it was,
yeah.
yeah. But, yeah, it was a good experience. They kinda need Roberts talked about LaPerry. LaPerry does a lot of that stuff
Yep.
too, with all their trade shows, which is a unique experience.
Mhm.
If any brand's ever been a part of the LaPerry trade show, it's, uh, the retailers get really excited about that because they do get some hella good deals.
Yeah, no pun intended for our guest next week. So, you're on the emerging brand side now, and obviously I am, but indirectly on the other side as a service provider. So, you're just getting traction, when I say traction, limited. You know, maybe you're in North Carolina, and maybe you've gotten into Earth Fair or something. I don't know. Just make something up. What is your show strategy? You know, you've got all these everything we've talked about. We've talked about KeHE, we talked about Unify, we've talked about Fancy Fair, we've talked about Expo. What is your strategy? Where do you put your money in the first year or so as you're building distribution, or do you at all?
So, I'm a brand and,
Yeah, you're a brand
I
and you're
I'm
trying
going
to
to a trade
build
show.
and you're trying to get you're trying to build your sales. You're who you are. You're a VP of sales, or whatever title you want to make up for yourself. You are advising, okay, here's what we're going to do the first, call it, I don't know, 12, 24 months from a show strategy standpoint. What is
Hmm.
it? Is there a strategy?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, you gotta figure out, like, in this specific example, I think you have to understand what your product is, who your target market is, and then if those are clearly defined, for yourself as a company, and if you've shown success at Earth Fair in this example, uh, I think you have to have the confidence to figure out what style of retailer. So again, Earth Fair is natural organic. And if it's working there, it's like, okay, I want to stay regionally as much as possible, because more than likely, like, your warehousing or whatever is East Coast. But it's like, okay, mom's organic market, up on the East Coast. That would be like a logical next step because you're showing success at the Earth Fair. They are a very like retailer, and that would be something that I would want to step into. Plus, it's a bigger store footprint, possibly more volume,
Hmm.
and then keep kind of going that route with the natural organic stores if you've shown that success. If you want to get cute, and stay on the East Coast, like, dial it up to Wegmans, but
Hmm.
understand that that's 100 high volume
High volume.
stores. Um, Now that's gonna be a hybrid retailer that does natural organic really well, and they also, I mean, they do everything in their store really well.
Right.
But that's gonna be a different type of volume that both, Mom's Organic Market and Earth Fare, choose to do. Um, but what I would suggest, and I would suggest to all brands, is, like, understand what role you play within the space that you're playing at the retailer that you're selling at. So, obviously, I've been in the beverage space. I don't want to use that as an example, but if you're an up and coming pasta company, and you've carved out 5 facings or 5 SKUs in Earth Fare, and they're all selling well, or your core 3 is selling really well, and maybe the other 2 are you know a little bit further behind the pack. Those 3 SKUs need to be your priority wherever you pitch next, because you're going to save a little bit of money on slotting, but you know that those 3 SKUs are performing where you currently have it. And then if you can build into those other 2 because the other 3 have sold really well, that's great too. Like, there's
Mhm.
nothing wrong with that. But I think you have to understand what role you play at each of the retailers in the space that you play in, and really focus on velocity, awareness, education of your product. Um, what I see a lot of brands do is you scale too fast. You get into too many places all at once, then you haven't fixed the problem. And typically the problem is it's not moving off shelf because it's intensely competitive. It doesn't matter if you're a beverage or a yogurt or whatever, like you're in that 4 foot of space, that 8 foot of space or 12 foot of space. It's very competitive. You
Right.
know, you're not the only one. And if you've got a good price point, that's cool. But then the philosophy or the psychology behind a buyer is, or a consumer, they might be shopping price tags, right? They might be shopping price tags at Whole Foods. They might be doing that at Sprouts. Um, so you're going to be missing out on that opportunity. You might be on only be on promo once every 4 months. You might shine during that. How are you selling the other 3 months?
Right.
Like you have to really, really, really understand um, how you're doing uh, at that retailer and if it's scalable.
Right.
If you're just kind of skating by, you might fall flat on your face at the next retailer. And all retailers are different and they all got different programs.
Right.
And like Jeff just said, problems compound. And
Yeah.
that's 1,000% right.
Yeah, so I wholeheartedly agree with everything you said. I go a little bit not different direction, but just kind of, some other things to think about is, you talked about velocities, you talked about, like the Earth Fair example and moms and so on, Wegmans. The other strategy in addition to is assuming you've gotten someone to anchor a DC is to see who the other retailers are pulling from that DC. In the
Hmm.
case of, if it's regionally focused, it's making sure the DC's velocities are also well, right? Because okay, so
Yeah.
you've gotten on the shelf at Earth Fair and now potentially targeting Wegmans, Mom's Organic or what have you. But if your volume going back to Earth Fair isn't just enough by Earth Fair, one of the other ways to solve that, just the DC health is to attack other retailers within that DC so that you're keeping the DC healthy. Because that's a problem that can also get you is that if the volume in that DC isn't strong enough, you can get discontinued
Yeah.
by the distributor. And so you have to there's multi ways to look at
Yeah.
as far
And
as
like,
that goes.
I love this specific example because um, that's a really good thing that a lot of emerging brands should ask themselves or ask somebody. Like if you get an anchor to say yes, your next thing should be okay, that's great. Whether that's 20 stores or 40 stores or whatever, what are the next 40 stores that I can put on out of this DC?
Mhm.
And if it's 40 independents, that's not all going to happen at once.
No.
That's going to take a little bit of time. If it's another 40 stores because another chain's interested, that's great. You're gonna potentially do something with that DC as long as the velocity takes care of itself at store level. But if because KE has this and so does Unify, you're gonna have some really good anchors that you don't need any help with. You're gonna have some other anchors that you're gonna need help with.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is you're gonna need more door counts to support those anchors and those velocities because exactly to your point, after 6 months, I think Unify and KE start taking a look at that you might not be new anymore, right?
Right.
You're gonna get that benefit of the doubt for the first 6 or 8 months, but then after that, you might be on the soon to be discoed list or um, in threat of that. And
Right.
that's you've already paid your slotting fees, your fines, your deductions, your everything, your new item program and all that kind of stuff. You need to start printing the money at that point or printing product at that point.
Yeah, and the other thing to think about, and we could probably keep going a whole episode on this, but is picking on like not picking on, but using the fresh market example is this could change because I've been going now for almost 2 years, but they had 4 unified DCs,
Mhm.
and some of those were really really healthy, but
Yep.
exactly to your point, the one or two of those DCs weren't as healthy, and so even though they had that 160 170 store anchor with the fresh market, a couple of those DCs they didn't have that many stores pulling from. So the strategy there should be okay, well, great. I'm doing great at the fresh market as a whole, but because I don't have that many accounts or that many of their stores pulling from this DC, they put it in all the planograms. But at this DC in particular, maybe there's only making a number up 10 stores pulling from it. I need some help to keep that DC healthy because you might be humming and rolling and rocking at these other 2, 3 DCs, but this one I have to focus my strategy on to make sure that we don't have problems with dating or with discontinuation at that
Yep.
DC. And it happens. It happens. So being getting a landing 170 store retailer isn't isn't the end of the road. I mean, these things are things that you don't think about or might not think about, right?
Yeah, yeah, and they are things you should think about, and that's a really good example. And the Earth Bear one, when I was there, we had 3 DCs. We had Greenwood, Atlanta, and Sarasota, and Atlanta was the beast. Atlanta was the one that had the bulk of the stores that was pulling out of it, and then the Greenwood DC is notorious, for, I think, every brand, where
Mhm.
it's like, if you don't have Fresh Market, Heinen's, or Whole Foods pulling out of there, you're kinda up, you're not
Up
in
the
a
creek.
you're n yeah, you're not gonna be in a healthy spot because, I mean, they got some good independents too, but that means you have to find out how to sell to each one of those independents. And that, again, that can take some time because uh, that doesn't just happen overnight. Um, and look, the category managers, they're not going to help you so much on this. They have a little bit of power in this, where if the brand comes up on the soon to be discoed list or whatever, they can flex a little bit, but at some point that's going to wear off, and
Right.
you have to be prepared for that. That's why it's always very smart, for an emerging brand, if they get accepted for your best SKUs. If you get accepted for your best SKUs, then that can scale out to
Innovation.
the other DC and the other independents in that, and you should have good velocity as long as your product is turning. But if you like, let's say Earth Fare or Fresh Market overcommits and they commit to 7 SKUs, and 3 of them are good and 4 of them are so. Well, those 4 are gonna be on the chopping block more than likely.
Right.
So it is very important, and also, like, looking at the data and all the metrics that you can afford, right? I think what's great about Unify and KE is their dashboards are pretty easy to understand, and uh, you know, they can guide you pretty well.
Right.
Spins obviously can guide you excellent. Um, but if you're not looking at any of this stuff, then it does create a little bit of a problem. You might be blind, and you shouldn't be driving blind in any of these things. But
Right.
that's what's out there. So um, yeah, it's definitely tricky. But again, understand your path to success. So if you do get accepted into one retailer, it's just the start, and you need to start filling out that DC. That's the next most important thing.
Yep. Robert says it's like running a Broadway play. Don't disagree. Rich is in Fort Worth today watching some eye tracking in person. Rich, I'm curious if your eyes and ears have been burning because I brought you up a couple times over the last week at the show and on CPG office hours talking a little bit about eye tracking. So uh, good to see you here. Yeah. And I don't want to completely pivot from this if we've got more to talk about, but I know there was a couple things I think you mentioned right when we get the show about, some new things that are, kind of news, just generally speaking, products, line extensions, things like that. I don't know if you
Yeah,
want to touch on those, because I think I have at least an example or two, but I think you had something specific on your mind.
yeah. I think just finishing up with that comment that we just talked about, like, if worst case scenario is, you can definitely flex with the retailer on the brand side to keep product moving, right? You can get aggressive promotions. That's just not a long-term sustainable play. So, that's always a fallback option to try to inflate volume to, try to keep the cases flowing through the DCs and things like that. But obviously, the goal would be to get on a promotional schedule with multiple retailers that are winning with your product. If you're not winning out of those DCs that you're currently in, then I think you just need to reevaluate, have some self-reflection. Are these the right retailers? Um, is our product more natural, organic, or is it more conventional? And just really try to figure that out. But it's best to do that in your first year versus, thinking the solve is more doors. I think
Right.
if anybody thinks the solve is more doors, you probably don't have a good product,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's not moving.
You used a word there that I want to emphasize when you're thinking about this strategy, and that was sustainable.
Mhm.
And sustainable can take on a number of things, whether it's supply chain, whether it's financial, or what have you. And I think one of the common mistakes out the gate that brands make is, I say it 100,000 times, is, it's easy to get on the shelf. It's not, but it is.
Yeah.
Anybody can buy their way on a shelf with slotting, with refills, with all these things. You find your way on the shelf, and then when you start talking about promotions, I've seen brands literally pretty much blow their brains out with, whether it's a BOGO, whether it's, um, something. The example I would use, and it's not for maybe you're an established brand, but this is part of your strategy. I Correct me if I'm wrong before I keep going. Most people on the sales side, yourself included, are typically gauging year over year comps, right? How did you
Yeah.
perform this quarter, this month, this week versus last year? Okay.
Yeah, so, 2 trains of thought there, right?
Yep.
Like, I think once you start lapping yourself year over year, you're definitely comping that. I think something you also wanna see is your last 12 weeks versus the previous 12 weeks versus the previous 12 weeks. You obviously wanna show, like, are we getting into more doors? Are we selling more product in the same doors? Like, you wanna gauge that too. Because, like, let's just say you did $100,000 in Q1, and then you did $40,000 in Q2, and then you did $50,000 in Q3, and then you did $20,000 in Q4. Like, there's a problem there, right? You got front
Right.
loaded heavy, sold a little bit, but it's not selling to the expectation that that first PO or the first quarter sold. So, what's going on?
Right.
Um, and then if you roll up to Q1 of the following year and you're at 50,000 versus 100, something's happening.
Right. Well, an example I was going to use too, and this is by no way, shape, or form a negative or anything. I'm just an example. So one of the Fresh Market's most popular merchandising programs is their weekly $25 little big meal, right?
Mhm.
And it's phenomenal. The numbers are fantastic. Drives traffic. They're well known for it. Uh, and they typically, just if you're not familiar, they usually have a protein. There's usually multiple components throughout the store. You have the concept is I'm feeding a family of four. It's the prices fluctuate. I think it's currently $25, but for $25, I'm feeding a complete meal for a family of four. And usually there's a protein, maybe a bun, bread, produce, grocery component. And so obviously they need different items, brands, categories to participate in these programs. And the volume again is undeniable. The volume is amazing. The example and why I'm bringing this up is if you participated in that program in Q1 of last year as a brand, and you blew the doors, and you would trust me when I say that it's a fantastic,
Yeah, yeah.
this is a testament to who they are and what they do. Come quarter one next year, you might not have that in your control. Maybe they're not going to do the same meal that they did that quarter. Maybe they have changed the components of the meal. Maybe they've done something different that you can't control, that you don't, it's not even an option. How are you going to overlap that volume? Right.
Mhm.
Or maybe that spend was so big that financially you can't do it. Even if you have the opportunity, you can't do it. So when you agree to do things like a BOGO, like some hot thing that I encourage you to think of, like you mentioned, a quarter ahead, 6 months ahead, 12 months ahead, and the fluctuation. We're not even talking about spins, but how does that data look like, and your numbers in general? How are you going to comp those numbers? Because if you're not thinking in advance of how you yeah, and I'll put both hats on. I'll put my category manager hat on at the Fresh Market in this example, and I'll put my brand hat on and say, how am I doing these same numbers again next year? So when I talk about sustainable, that should be part of the consideration, right? Is okay,
Yeah.
a year from now, my numbers are going to be up here. What am I going to do in a year? If I can't do exactly what I did this year, how am I comping those numbers?
Yeah, and it goes both ways, right? So, like,
Yeah.
on the sales side, if you ran a BOGO, in Q1 of this year, that buyer is also gonna kind of expect you to run that BOGO in Q1 of next year, because if you blew the doors off, guess what?
It's
He's gotta
managing the
lap his
category.
he's gotta lap his numbers. Um, but that also goes back to, as an emerging brand, maybe you don't do nearly as much volume in that BOGO, but your brand grows because you got trial and all that kind of stuff. And
Right.
Q2 is better because you ran that BOGO in Q1. And then the promos that you ran in Q2 inflated Q3 because you're generating more customers.
Yep.
Obviously, that's a perfect storm of success. And then when you lap next year on that BOGO, you might not have to run the BOGO because your base
Built
sales are
the
the same
base.
as the BOGO sales previously. So again, it's a lot to absorb and all that kind of stuff and those perfect scenarios and things. But again, this industry is not easy. It's there is a lot of thought. It's not just getting your product in stores and wiping your hands. It's figure out how you can grow and or fail and grow from the failure.
Right. And just as you as a brand and salesperson analyze performance and promotional success rates and things like that, internally, whether it's a category manager themselves or your bigger chains typically have some kind of financial um, support, financial planning analysis, something like that, that's feeding them like pre-post analysis, right? What was your volume going into the promotion? Here's your promotional performance, but then what is your volume post performance, right? And what does that look like? So
Yeah.
we do have some comments, questions we should touch on. I think you were just getting to them now.
Yeah, I
Um,
really like that thing from Jeff. I think everybody probably read that for the last couple minutes, but this one from Melissa is really good. So, what's your perspective if shelf placement? Oh, this is a really good question. What's your perspective if placement is wrong and need to request from a buyer to merchandise it in a better spot before dying? What's the appropriate approach without being annoying and getting canceled or discontinued?
hmm. Well, I mean, there's a number of ways to attack this. First, how do you know this shelf placement that's wrong? How are you justifying without hiring rich insights for eye tracking as far as, hey, this product's on the bottom shelf and my eyes didn't even go down to it. So, what is first? I'd analyze that. What is your case for saying, hey, Joe Buyer, you merchandise this wrong? It should be either over here or
Also, a
on
buyer's
this.
probably not gonna necessarily like hearing that. So
No,
you're gonna have to in my opinion, you're gonna have to really come with, "Why is it merchandised wrong?"
yeah,
And you have to be very, very nice about it and educational and informative. It's also gonna be hard I mean, I've heard of examples of where it works, but if you're going from the bottom shelf to the middle shelf, like, you're gonna have to put together a baller case,
right.
for that to happen. Like, the buyer put you in the bottom shelf for a reason, right? Yeah, or for his or her reason.
Right.
So you're gonna have to come with a pretty elaborate case of why.
Y
And hopefully, and this is what I would suggest, you're taking that from a past retailer, pictures, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
We sell 10 units a week out of this space right here, and it's at this retailer, and this retailer. We're on bottom shelf. We need some help here.
Yep. Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head is approach it delicately. You can't go in with a mindset that you're wrong. But saying, hey, let's, you're following up on your regular cadence, whatever that may be, to talk about performance and how you're performing in the category and planning ahead for promotions, blah blah blah. If you feel that in your case that you are merchandised incorrectly or could be merchandised better, you're doing the thinking for the buyer, right? You're going to your model store or competitor, whoever that may be. You're taking pictures of ideally what it looks like, and then you have data or some kind of performance to back it up, right? You can say, hey, I have at this store, like you said, it's comparable store, overall estimated store volumes are the same, which you're not going to know, but you can kind of assume and say, hey, this is how we're doing, and blah blah blah. And so what would Rich say? If you're on the bottom, adapt your packaging and potentially take bigger risks for standing out, and that
Yeah,
goes,
I
yeah.
and look, at the end of the day too, like, you're the buyer's gonna have to move something else to where your product was, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And then that brand's not gonna
Someone's gonna
be
someone's gonna be on the bot. And here's the thing, though. I'm not challenging you, Rich, because you're the expert. But one thing I would say is you can't necessarily, unless you only have one retailer, and that retailer is huge, and you've built your brand to service that retailer. Kind of what we're going back is, I'm going to perform here. I'm going to execute before I go anywhere else. You can't necessarily completely do your packaging because that one retailer you're on the bottom shelf, right? Because at every
Yeah.
other retailer I might be on the middle or the top. So I agree with what he's saying in concept, but then also I always go back to using the example of Jimbo's versus the fresh market, let's say, or Whole Food, Sprouts, whoever. If I've got 4 stores centralized in San Diego, I'm probably not going to make business decisions solely on feedback and or things that are happening there. But if the same feedback performance, et cetera, is happening at a 400 or 500 store chain, then it's a little bit different conversation, right? Then I then say, well, geez, I might need to tweak it because I'm going to get discontinued here, right? So,
Yep.
and Rich says, what did he say here? Oh, I want to go back to Jeff too. I'm sorry. Take
You're
pictures
good.
from one store that merchandise poorly, and then a store where your merchandise well. We track them both. Yep, exactly.
Yep.
Love that.
Yeah, and then Melissa, just to finish that off, if you don't get success from getting re-merchandised into a better position, try to get some concessions. Try to say, hey, I'd like some display space in your store to try to maximize being on the bottom shelf or the far left or the far right, where maybe you're not prominently merchandised, and see if you can get something a concession from the buyer there.
Yeah, this is a great comment from Jeff on TikTok, and because this happens daily, weekly, ongoing. I mean, going back, the first one that comes to mind, and Gavin, if you've got a better example, give it to me. But the dude on the skateboard with ocean spray cranberry,
Yeah,
that stuff went bonkers, right? And then
yeah.
from there, it was like the next one
I
that
think they bought him like a car or something. I
oh
mean,
they
he,
yeah
he
crazy.
tons of stuff.
Yeah, and then from there, the one that comes to mind is I can't tell you what the recipe was, but the item was Celtic sea salt,
Yeah.
and
I
we
the one that's most recent for me is the Saratoga Springs, with Ashton Hall or something like that, where he was doing the sparkling water, Saratoga Springs sparkling water into a bowl and doing the face
yeah
hydration thing.
those things are but to Jeff's point, those things are going to happen, and you kind of have to, as a salesperson specifically, you have to make sure you understand what those peaks and valleys are and what's happening to your business, not to mention supply chain and everything else. But then, taking it from owning the P&L and understanding that, okay, next year, how are we going to attack that? And maybe it's a regurgitation of that viral video, or maybe, hey, a year ago, and just trying to drum up or something, but you have to have some kind of strategy to kind of counteract some of those things, because you're right, you can't control it. And it's off the chains. What do you got from Robert?
This is just a comment. I'm sure he was probably talking to one of his crazies over the week, but take pictures of the store, the shelf, the people, the lineups, images that make the case to communicate the message, the visuals.
Yeah,
And like Richard
100%.
said,
100%. Caution with taking pictures. Some stores, frown big time on that. So be discreet and or ask permission. But yeah,
I feel
absolutely.
it's
I
not
think
as frowned
yeah.
on now
I
as it
don't
used
think
to
it
be.
is. I mean,
Too many
let me.
influencers
I'll
out
say.
in the
I'll
world.
say this: in conventional, it was a lot more because price,
Petty,
you're price matching and doing all those things.
Petty just said we have some in Saratoga Springs. We have some in backstock that rode the wave, or rode that wave on that one last year.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Something I want to talk about now that we actually have Kenny here
Okay.
is some of these weird, maybe not weird, some of these things that we've seen on BevNet. BevNet's done an amazing job over the last, I want to say, 3-4 months with plugging these new items, new features, all that kind of stuff. So I've seen Wade for new items, and I'm not putting brands here, just ideas. A creatine soda.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen a lot of protein sodas now. I haven't tried one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I obviously prebiotic sodas all over the place now. Protein coffee, so that's coming up. And then I most recently saw Beyond Meat is creating a Beyond drink that is protein infused.
Is so I saw that as well, and my question to that, I don't know if you have the answer. I didn't read it. I just saw it.
Yep.
Obviously it's not April Fools, but also I'm remembering fondly the David Barr cod thing.
Yeah.
Is this truly they're expanding into this, or is it just marketing something? Do you know?
I haven't looked into it, but I do feel like it is real. Just because of the protein trend, obviously, right? Like I think Genius Gourmet with their protein 20, I think it's 25 grams of protein in their thing that blew up at Costco, and those guys were sold out for quite a while, and Costco went crazy with it, and now there's these other pieces. I mean, again, I think some of this stuff is cool. It's just how much space do we have in store for all this stuff, right? So, like when we're talking about soda, I mean, you have Coke and Pepsi and all the other guys that are associated with sugary soda. Then you have Olipop and Poppy, and now protein soda and creatine soda, so like where is this stuff going to live? Is it all going to live in soda, or is it going to create another aisle of of beverages?
Yeah, I don't know, as long as it has legs, products, we're seeing, like you said, pretty much every category in the store focused on protein, whether it's the call out, whether it's that, hey, we've always had protein, but here's how much protein we have, or here's a category that maybe we weren't, some of the ones you mentioned, and now we have protein in it. Whether it's snacks, whether it's beverage, whether it's everything, right? I think as long as people are buying it, it's going to be there. And
Yeah.
obviously, the key there is
Taste.
has to taste good,
Yep.
has to be priced that people want to continue to buy it.
I'm
So
curious. I'm really curious on the Beyond one, just because obviously they had their whatever $1 billion valuation or whatever it was, with their meat alternatives, and it is an interesting segue into, I'm going to go ahead and assume that it's a vegan protein that that they're using. Um, And if that tastes good, if there's no weird aftertaste, like, and then I didn't look at the protein content, but I'm gonna go ahead and guess it's probably 15 to 25 is what
right,
I would guess. Um, I could see that actually being a pretty good item for them. Now, like, also, where does that sell in the store? And same thing with protein soda, is like, is that gonna sell in health and wellness, or is that gonna sell off a grocery aisle, um, where Olipop and Poppy and all that kind of stuff is.
yeah.
It's definitely going to be interesting. Same thing with creatine. Creatine, I would associate that with the health and wellness category, but it'll be interesting to see where these brands start focusing their time and energy at.
Right, right. Some good comments from Kenny says beyond Jeff, beyond drinks, oy vey, beyond drinks, beyond drinks,
Yeah,
beyond help.
I love that.
Yeah, it should likely live with traditional soda to shrink that shelf space as it takes market share. And I don't disagree with that. Yeah, I don't disagree with that
Yeah,
at all.
one of the things I'm not educated on right now is like what the trend. Like, I know what the trend in alcohol is, right? Like, the trend in
Mhm,
alcohol is plummeting.
mhm.
I don't know what the trend in soda is. I would imagine, obviously, better for you soda is going crazy through the
Right.
roof. But what's Coke and Pepsi and Mountain Dew and all the Dr Pepper? What are those guys seeing
Well, they're
on their
buying
own?
they're buying Celsius, they're buying Poppy, they're buying, it's
Yeah,
like
so
it
energy's
tells
yeah,
you what the trend is, I
yeah,
mean,
energy is exploding, but,
yeah,
I don't see those pop aisles getting any pop. I don't see those soda
so
aisles getting
yeah.
any, uh, less space anyways. It feels like they're just making more space.
Yeah. Yeah. Crazy stuff. Well, Gavin, an hour has flown by quickly. We didn't come into this with anything on the agenda outside of just talking a little bit about Fancy Fair, and look where we ended up. Holy
I
smokes.
dig it,
So,
man. It flew
yeah.
by.
Yeah.
I appreciate the time, appreciate the comments, appreciate all the community that's coming back. And Wade, I think, just send us off with our guest next week, and we're obviously really looking forward to that. I think, and we're trying to have some other really good guests on over the next couple weeks, and again, I think we're gonna dig into Hella Cocktail, their start, their mid season, and not where they're at now, and we're gonna be getting back into that, so I look forward to it.
Definitely, definitely. And if I don't at least say once, which I haven't, by the way, we haven't plugged anything outside of brands and rich insights. Let's make sure you give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, thumbs up, subscribe, like, all that stuff that you can do. That helps us. And then also, if you could start helping us share, get things back going. I know we took some time off, well deserved time off, by the way. But call a neighbor, share with a friend, and help us out on LinkedIn. Give us some loves. We're kind of the OGs in the space, so want to make sure everyone doesn't forget about us. But yeah, I'm excited to talk to John Marie and Hella Cocktail, but also included CPG, and what he's working on. So that should be a really good show next week. So all right, cool. Well, we'll see everybody next week, and everybody have a good weekend, and see you on the flip side.
Adios.
Bye.